You're listening to the Marginally Geeky Show, the epically geeky book club.
Greetings and welcome to the Marginally Geeky Show. I'm your host for the evening, Eugene Stevens. Tonight we are joined by our whole cast. We got everyone back together. The whole band's back together. We've got Jen, Sean, Chris, and Ray. How's everyone doing?
Yay!
Great.
Peachy.
Super.
Tonight we had to push back, as you can tell. We had to push back. Life happens. We had to push back a little bit in order to finish this book. But we wanted to make sure that we got everyone through the book because hopefully we can maybe get the author back on. We'll see. We are reading. We read Bobiverse, book 4, Heaven's River. So before we get into our initial thoughts on this book, a couple things to bring up. When we were talking to Dennis E. Taylor, the author, he had said that originally he was planning on this book being 2 books. And then he got the notification saying, hey, we're going to kind of just smush them together, make it one large book. And he's like, oh, okay, sure. Yeah. So
It was so long.
It was a pretty long book. And I can definitely see. I think it was me and Ray on just kind of a separate chat. I was like, so where do you see that they would have broken the book? And where he said is exactly where I thought too. I thought, well, this is exactly where he would have broken the book in half, and I would have been like, really, until we had to wait for the second part. But on the upside, we didn't have to wait for a second part. I mean, I loved all of it anyway, but it was definitely on the longer side.
That's what she said.
That's what she said. So that being said, let's go ahead and give our initial impressions. Would anyone like to go first?
Motorola!
So, Ray, what were your initial impressions reading the book?
So initial impressions were I was just so happy to be back in the universe. So happy to be immersed with all those characters. I was curious, kind of. I remember like, fuck, whatever happened to Bender? I know he kind of, and then they didn't really bring it up in the trilogy, and so I was happy that they were going after him and trying to figure out where he was and what was going on. And I would have kind of liked to have known a little bit more as to what was going on with Bob, as to like there's a bit of a hiatus in between, and so they didn't really touch on it very much, other than he's MIA for a while he was traveling. And then the other person that I wanted to know about a little bit more as to why he did his hiatus was Riker, because he just kind of brushed aside as to he was been in the mountains for a while, and it's like, so other than choosing to, I mean, he anyway, just a couple little things of like a bridge between the two book, the last book and this one would have been nice. But other than that, I was just excited to be in the whole universe again.
Nice. Chris, what were your initial impressions?
Trying to remember where the last book ended, and I didn't remember, but thankfully Dennis did a good job of sort of doing a recap a little bit. Most of the time I do have pretty good recall for books that I've read in the past, as long as I get like a little tidbit of information, like, oh yes, that happened, and then it'll come back. So thankfully he did that. I was just excited to see where he was going to take this and see what else he was going to add and how the Bobiverse was going to change, if it was going to change. And yeah, that's kind of it. And I like Howard and Bridget. I really like Bridget.
Yeah, they're great.
So I wanted to see if he was going to add more of them. And but I really liked it. I listened to it in chunks, so I don't really notice how long it is, because I only listen to it like a half hour here, hour there, 2 hours tops if I'm driving somewhere far. And then this last week I've been listening to it in the house. So yeah, and then the ending I literally yelled out and immediately called
She called me at work. She's like, "What the fuck?"
I yelled out as soon as I heard the credits. I'm like, "What the fuck, Dennis?" And then I had to call pray and vent a little bit, express myself.
Listen, if he had to cut it off where you
I probably would have said it regardless. Like if
Yeah.
you had to split it off into 2 books, I probably would have been like, I mean, I love a good cliffhanger, but I also hate it too. So
Yep. Jen, what were your thoughts?
It was very long and hard for me to find the time to get through the whole thing. So I was listening to it like every free moment I had in the car, at home. But it was a great story. I just really struggled with this one, remembering things, getting the storyline straight. I don't know why. I don't feel like I had this much trouble the first 3 books, but I had to rewind so many times because I would miss something, or I'd be like, I don't understand. So I just felt a little stupid for a lot of it because I couldn't remember. Like there were things they would bring up and I was like, oh yeah, that did happen in one of the books. And I just, even though I listened to our previous 2 episodes, it doesn't even come close to covering everything that happened. So it was a little frustrating because I just seem to have more trouble with this one for some reason. I was also trying to listen to it way too fast, so that probably didn't help too, but I was trying to get through it.
I don't know how Eugene does that.
Yeah,
I'll just
it was bad.
I can't do it. I cannot do it at normal speed. It's like pulling teeth to me. And I've talked to some other people and they're like, yeah, once you go down that road, you don't go back. Like there's no going back. Cause like
No,
my
I could go
wife will
back.
be like, you can put on a podcast if you want. I'm like, can I at least do like a 1.5 times speed? Because if I have to put it on normal speed, I'd rather just sit there in silence. Like it's just,
cry.
yeah, it's just gonna drive me insane. Sean, what were your initial thoughts?
Well, like I knew those first 3 books backwards and forwards. I kept re-listening to them and all that. So I love the book. Don't get me wrong, it's great, but I found it quite a departure from the first 3 books. Dennis really seemed to narrow his focus on the story. Like there was snippets of different Bobs and stuff like that going on, where in the first 3 books you had very distinct other stories going on in the same universe, where this one was really focused on Heaven's River with a couple little side bits almost like they're thrown in. Now, I don't know how much we want to give away here, but some of those side bits you can tell are going to be very important down the road. And I was really interested in those little tidbits. I'm like, man, can we get some more of that story? And that drove me nuts. Like when the book ended, I'm like, oh my God, can you not have expanded some more on this stuff? He really did get into metaphysical stuff, I found it was really interesting. I had to re-listen to that a couple times. And I had a bit of a hard time with the engineering. But I wasn't the only one, because Dennis actually posted on his website descriptions, and I came up with the stuff for like the Topopolis, and that helped. The mega structures were so cool, but man, I had to like sit down with like a pen and paper and start kind of drawing stuff out and like,
It's very technical.
what's going on here? So that I found I was more interested in the little side stories that he would just drop a hint of here and drop a hint of there, rather than the search and rescue main story. Like I was interested in it, but I was like, yeah, this is kind of cool, but can we talk about something else? Because with those first 3 books, he'd give you just enough to like in a story to keep you really, really interested, and then you move on to something else and like, oh yeah, that was a really good story too, and then you move on to another, oh, that's a really good story too. This one was like, you had that main bit, and then you'd have like a little leaf coming off here.
Well,
and
you also had the coup.
Yeah. Well,
happening.
and even that coup though, like in like relation to that whole book, they didn't talk about the coup that much.
No, they didn't. No, you're right.
So
every now and then they would put it in, like it was important, and you could kind of figure out what was going on, but it would have been more interesting to find out like those Bobs in their discussions, which he never had, like how the coups were forming and stuff like that. Like in the other books, you'd have entire storylines focused on other Bobs, where you didn't really have that in this book, and that would have been interesting. But he is getting to the point where like there's just too friggin' many of them. You can't do that.
There's two things with that, and I don't know if it's intentional by any means. So for one is, it kind of felt like the first book again, where you're following along with Bob, because for the majority of that first book, you're following Bob.
Yeah.
Then in the later part, you start hearing about these other Bobs. So I'm wondering if it's kind of a parallel there. Yeah. And then the other thing that I was going to say too is for me, it felt very natural. And again, I don't know if this was intentional or not. It felt very natural for us to be focused on Bob because he was so cut off from the rest of the Bobiverse, especially after Star Trek did what they did and started cutting everybody off and everything. So I didn't mind those little tidbits because it felt like that's what Bob would have got. He's getting all this little bit of information as we go. So maybe that's why I just.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I love the tidbits. I just wish they were bigger.
You wanted more book? You didn't. 26 hours wasn't enough for you?
That's how long it was?
I had no problem with that.
Yeah.
I basically got it done in a couple days. So
yeah,
it's one of those ones where it's like I'm not stopping until I've listened to this whole thing.
Yeah, I was the same.
So, but yeah, that was my initial impressions, and it's still the same. I think I've done more research on the engineering, so if I go back and reread it, there's certain things that I would definitely pick up on a little bit more. But it's like the science and the metaphysics stuff and all that. The storyline was good, but I found I was more interested in the little things going on around, because by the end of the book, those little things are really adding up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's something bigger.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
So I've actually gone through the book twice. Sean, like you, I have reread the original 3. I don't know how many times. I love them. It's comfort food at this point.
Yeah.
My first read and second read, of course this is listen, but my first read and second read were different. My first read, I was excited, but also nervous the entire time. I love these characters. I love this world that he's built in. And the idea that it's going to be destroyed or it's going to come apart scares the hell out of me. And the entire time I kept listening, and we did get a cutaway. It was, oh fuck, well here's where he's gonna drop the bomb. Here's where someone that I care for died, or here's where, everything's gonna blow to shit. And so when we didn't quite get that, there are some changes, and it's definitely setting up stuff. The second read through was a lot more enjoyable for me because I was like, okay, good. I know things are going to get different, but not necessarily fall off the cliff, which I was kind of nervous about. I agree and I echo everything you just said, Sean. The first books, yes, they do start off with Bob, but then they very quickly turn into, not like a traditional sitcom. Let's say more like let's take more like a big drama like Game of Thrones. You've got multiple characters, and you go with each character for a little while, and then you flip over to another character, and yes, they cross paths, but then they'll have their own things, and they interact, but everyone has their own path, and we're following multiple paths all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
This was more like a sitcom in that you have the A plot, a B plot, maybe a C plot. And we keep hitting the A plot, and every so often we go off and we get part of the B plot, things that are going off in the Bobiverse. So it's definitely different. It's kind of like, I'd almost rename it instead of Heaven's River, something like Bob's Excellent Adventure, because it does focus on Bob. But yeah, so like I said, I was nervous listening to it the first time because I was like, oh man, please don't destroy this world that I love so much. And when that wasn't the case, then I could take a deep breath, listen to it a second time and really enjoy it. So let's talk a little bit about. Let's go ahead and start off and talk a little bit about the science and the engineering behind this. So I think. Thank goodness for Star Trek: The Next Generation. I think a lot of people are aware of what a Dyson sphere is. So when it was initially brought up in the other book, Jen's shaking her head.
Nope. No idea.
Anyone who watched TNG religiously knows what a Dyson sphere is, and it was just like, oh shit, a Dyson sphere. That's interesting. I'd never heard of this type of a megastructure, so it was a little confusing, and after definitely the second time I listened to it, it made more sense. But yeah, after he posted the thing explaining exactly how it works, because some of it was just like, okay, so there's 3 strands and they twist, but they're also moving within an exterior, and I'm just like, what? And then like I read it up and I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I guess. But yeah, the engineering on that is just, and I love the fact that I've been introduced to something new that apparently is not like, he didn't just like, oh, I'm going to come up with some crazy idea. It's like, no, really smart people have already theorized that this is a thing that could feasibly happen. So,
and that we have the technology that if we actually all kind of got together, we could actually build it. Like that's the other part of this. So,
yeah, take a lot of resources, but
sure. But
yeah.
He even explains that, right? He even explains how much water they would need and how much resources they would actually require to do it. And so.
And I love the fact that they're like, well, there should be a planet here. I wonder why there's not a planet. Oh, that's why. So we're just going to take apart a planet and do this, which, I mean, yeah, okay. I mean, yeah, I guess it would definitely change the celestial model of the solar system, but if we figured out that Mars was like basically just this giant factory, or a bunch of stuff that we could use, it's like, well, it's not like, well, right now as far as we know there's nothing living on it, otherwise it's just like, yeah, might as well. So just take it apart and do what we need to do.
If you're a Doctor Who fan, you won't drink the water.
Oh yeah. So okay, so the book starts off with Bob's been out there, like at the end of the other books, Bob was like, I'm done. He's making a break from his previous life. I'm going out there and I'm going to explore. And it's just like, he's like, you know what, it's been a while. I'm gonna catch up with my buddies. And they're like, yeah, you've been gone for a while, Bob. We're up to 12, 13, 14 generations out, and we're starting to see some weird stuff. Like, some of them are kind of acting like not Bob-like. They're a little out there.
Bobby.
Yeah. The Pav are kind of really standoffish. We're trying to take kid gloves with that, and then of course there's still a lot of people that just feel horrible about what happened, and they definitely have some PTSD from the previous war and everything that happened. Yeah. But humans are being humans and already starting to be stupid again, and Bob's just like, well, okay, that's interesting. Tell you what, I'm gonna see if I can find Bender. Like, I know we've already sent out some scouts to see, but I'm going to really take my time and see if I can figure this out. So
he's like, y'all deal with that bullshit. I'm going to go check this out over here.
Exactly. Yeah. And so Bob sets out, and when Bob finds, he's like, hey, I think I have a lead here. He's like, hey, time to check back in, see what's going on in the Bobiverse. And they're just like, dude, shit's like really crazy now. 'Cause now we're up to 25 generations out, and we have Bobs that don't even classify as Bobs. Like, there's a group that call themselves Starfleet, and they are dead set on the idea that the Bobs should have no interaction with anyone else. Like, humans should do human stuff, Pav should do Pav stuff, and Bob should stay the fuck out of everything. We have some cosplayers like walking around dressed up like Borg. We have gamers that literally, it sounds like that's all they do is they just like fucking role play and D&D, which, yeah. I'll be honest with you, like, if I were an immortal being, I would be like, hey, I'm gonna drop in every so often because this is gonna be some fun shit.
Mhm.
Especially being able to do the stuff in virtual, which would be so awesome. The whole thing with the dragon was just awesome.
Isn't that amazing?
The fact that he's just like, so I took the fire staff and shoved it up the dragon's butt, and guess what? The dragon's not fireproof after all.
I like that they paused it and like, does he get a save roll on that? Like,
Because that is totally what gamers would do. They would totally be like, all right, so how do we play this? Like, how do we roll this?
do I get a save roll? I don't know. How do you stop that?
Yeah, exactly. How do you dodge that? Yeah, exactly. Let's see. We have I forgot what the skippies. We have the skippies, and the skippies have basically are just like all super intellectual, and they're just like, hey, we're going to create an artificial intelligence, and we're going to basically live at our highest frame rate. Like the fact that we have to slow down to deal with humans. We're not against dealing with humans, but come on, you're wasting time. And of course the other Bobs are like, we're immortal. What do you mean wasting time? Like, but time is very important for them. They want to get to their end goal as quickly as possible. So we have all these factions that are starting to break out. And then on top of that, we have, like I said, humans are being humans and being stupid. And, we have what could possibly be some civil wars starting up. Not only within the Bobiverse, but with, between factions of humans, and then they're afraid of the Pav, and the Pav are not too keen on them and everything. So we have all this really interesting stuff that's happening, which, like I said, is kind of scaring the crap out of me. And then, I'm just going to kind of stick with the B plot stuff, as it were, before we hit to the main plot. We have some of the Bobs are just like, you know what? It's time to go. And like you brought up, like Will basically just told him, like, he's like, I'm out. I'm gone. And lives in a fucking mountain, dresses like a mountain man, which was funny because when they brought up about the beard, they're like, what's with the beard? And he's just like, until I started dressing like a mountain man, like they thought, oh no, he's still available. And he's like, no, I'm retired. Like, understand this shit is real. So, but we've got, there are several Bobs, and what are the two Bobs that are in the big giant shuttle? What's it called?
Herschel. Oh, the Valerathon.
We have the two Bobs there, right? And they're trying to. They've created a new android, basically, that's not quite liquid, but almost like a liquid Terminator. Two of them, and so they're
Mannequin
like,
Skywalker.
Yeah, they're basically that was, by the way,
name.
that was awesome. The fact that they're like, hey, we're thinking of like getting out of town just in case we were to come across something else like the others, or in something worse than the others. And so originally it starts off with this idea of, how about we take a small group of humanity and go way over there, just in case humanity were to get wiped out, we could still survive. And over what little bit we got of it over the course of the book, it's like, yeah, like shit's getting bad here again. So maybe we need to get the hell out of Dodge, and we're not necessarily going to help everyone out this time. Like
the other the other conversation that I like that they were having was the reason why that Will wants to leave is he's really interested in finding a much higher intelligence, and he understands that it is more like a pyramid where the highest intelligence will be the smallest amount of population within the whole area. But he's like, we haven't seen anything even close to us yet. Like, that doesn't make any sense. So that's what he's going to search for. And I do like that concept of there's something more going on than just, it's too random right now. And so I like that he's trying to figure that out.
Do you guys think it's strange that none of the other replicants, I guess, are cloning? Like, none of the humans that have become replicants are doing it. And Bobs have done it so extensively.
I wanted to bring that up. So we have hit a part far enough in the future, because we've had this conversation on the show. If you had the opportunity to become a replicant, would you? And we finally hit a point, and I like how he kind of explains it. It's like, well, we're far enough away from the war. Like, no one wanted to become a replicant because they're just like, hey, I'm just going to become cannon fodder for fighting the others. And now that they're far enough out from that, people are like, well, you know what? Maybe immortality is not that bad if you're not basically going to be, doing bullshit jobs. So we end up meeting one. He's a what would you call him? Astrophysicist? He's an engineer. He's yeah. And he's the one that helps them, understand the mechanics of this superstructure. Yeah. So I'm glad we did finally start to get some more people who are deciding to replicate. And I also love the fact that they're like, so what do you do? He's like, I teach. I still teach. They're like, really? He's like, yes, I was the best person in the field. I'm still the best person in the field, even though I'm technically dead. The university's like, well, all right, yeah, cool. And I love the fact that there was a conversation about pushback because people were like, well, that's a job someone else could have. He's like, well, you find someone better than me and they can have it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, even the college agreed. The college is like, yeah, we'll hire somebody that's living once we find somebody with his qualifications.
Yeah, exactly.
But like none of those folks are cloning.
True.
Right?
But I don't know about him, but that brings up a subject that comes up later on in the book. And that is we have a mission and it would become very imperative if we could get some clones because there's a breakdown in communication and we go to, well, one of our team members, Bridget, you want a clone and she considers it, but then goes back against it. So what are your thoughts on that? Because one of her biggest things is now she also said the main reason she decided against it, and I understand this. This is where cloning would be hard, because Bob was dead for 100 and some odd years or whatever. So everyone he knew was gone. Whereas, and so cloning's different for him. For Bridget, on the other hand, her and Howard have been raising children, and she's like, so if I were to clone myself, how do I tell my clone, oh, sorry, I'm the one that gets to stay with Howard?
And the kids, and you get nothing to do with any of them.
Yeah.
Like that's, yeah.
Like if you could set your mind, like if you could set your mind at one point and be like, okay, I'm going to clone and I'm telling myself right now, I am going to be okay with the fact that I'm not going to see my family. I am doing this because I want to focus on my hobby or whatever it is I want to, my job role. I want to focus on that. If you were able to do that, maybe, but that's the problem is you're not able to do that. Whenever they clone, you get a completely new person, and they may be like you, they may not be like you. Apparently, the further they get off, away from the original, there's more changes. But it's just like, yeah, how could you tell a clone of yourself, sorry, you don't get to be with the family and friends and even the job necessarily?
Well, but even if you came to that decision, and even if you were like, okay with it in your own way, how could you do that to yourself? And that's what she basically comes down to is I couldn't do that to my clone.
Right.
Which
on the shallow part, and they do address, and I love the fact that he did also address the shallow part of this, is the fact that, oh, hey, listen, there's this super cute redhead that's like super smart, which that's her sexiest quality is the fact she's super smart. And there's more of her.
Howard.
Yeah, I kind of want what Howard has, because Howard figured it out. Like, good job, Howard. But it's just like, that would just be, it's weird. It is a weird idea. Now, what's his name? Henry Roberts, the sailor. Now, if he wanted to clone, I could see where he would be like, well, yeah, I'm just making a different version of myself so that we can both sail. So I've got someone else there with me, or this way, maybe we can, cover more ground or whatever. But yeah, Bridget brings up a very interesting aspect when it comes to the cloning aspect. Because even at this point, how would Howard clone? Like, I don't think Howard could clone himself at this point anymore.
No.
I get Bridget. Like, that makes sense. I guess there's just so many other humans that are opting for this. And I'm surprised that they're not more involved in the Bobiverse and not cloning themselves, and maybe they are and we don't know about it, but it's not apparent at this point. So
The Bobs definitely did not make it look pleasant.
No.
right.
No.
Well, I still thought it was pleasant given the same situation, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what I mean, though. Like all the humans are looking at it like, okay, but now you're just warring with yourself. So I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So we have some of those interesting things, and like I said, I did want to bring that up. There's one other thing I want to bring up before we kind of start talking about like the main A story, as it were. So there's a conversation later on in the book where Hugh is talking to Bob, and he's like, so we have figured out a couple of things about the cloning situation, whereas we definitely have a soul, and it's one soul per person. Like, we are not just cloning, we are creating new individuals.
Yeah, I didn't understand that conversation at all.
Okay, so basically what he was saying is, if I were to clone myself, when I wake up, I'm still me. When my clone wakes up, it's a new person. So I'm Eugene, he's Robert. If, on the other hand, I basically create, a cloning station, a replicant somewhere else, and I shut myself down, transfer my information, my brain, to this other place, basically teleporting myself. When I wake up, I'm still me.
Yeah.
If I go back and wake this body up, I'm going to be a new guy. And they kind of roped it back into the whole idea that, well, maybe the universe is a computer program and it can't handle multiple copies of the exact same thing, which is why we have different variations. And of course, they're like, well, that's a pretty shitty program. But yeah, I thought that was interesting, to the fact that he's like, yeah, we've even tried it where, like, we've shut someone down and cloned them and woke the clone up first, and it turned out to be the person. And when we woke the original body up, it was the different person or whatever. So I thought that was an interesting idea for the embodiment of a soul, essentially. So.
Well, in the whole discussion of like information can't be destroyed, right? So if information can't get destroyed, the universe, this is the way of it writing itself, and I thought that was pretty cool.
Okay, so let's talk about kind of quote unquote the main story. So like I said, so Bob goes out, he finds what he thinks he's found the trail of Bender, and he stumbles upon this Topopolis, and it's essentially a giant ring instead of a Dyson sphere being, going all the way around a star. It is a giant ring, and within the ring there are multiple rings, essentially, that kind of twist in a helix. That are also spinning within it, and it's broken into I can't remember, thousands of segments. And there is some outside technology. They actually attack a couple of Bob's drones or whatever, and they're like, well, there's an intelligence here. They find the wreckage of Bender's ship, and no Bender, he's not in there. So they're like, well, these people probably know what the hell's going on. Let's go investigate. So they send some drones. They find out some information, and they find out it's a frontier type. Like, that's
Steam.
yeah. Like they're in like the steam age,
Yeah.
and they're giant beavers.
Otters.
Otter beavers.
Yeah.
With beaks, yeah.
Yeah. And they're living in this situation, and they're like, okay, how did these people, number A, build this, B, capture Bender, possibly. So there's definitely some information that needs to happen. So they come up with the idea, let's the only way we're going to find out is if we infiltrate this society and find out what's going on. So they basically put together a task force of it's Bob, Bridget, because she's the expert on different types of alien animals and stuff. Bill was in there, right? Or was it Will?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we
They
have a
both
backup.
were.
Yeah, and then we have a backup. We have Hugh.
Yes.
And Hugh is one of the Skippies. And I love the fact that they got the different groups together to kind of like, all these Bobs have all these different ideas and stuff, with the exception of Starfleet. When they start explaining what's going on, Starfleet's like, absolutely not. You don't need to interfere with these other people, and basically get shouted down because the other Bobs are either like, I want to find out about the people who are living there. I want to find out about like how this thing was built. Like all of the geeky Bob stuff comes back in all the Bobs, and that's what kind of reunifies them for a little bit. So they basically sneak into the society or whatever, and for being, even though they're pretty large, for being pretty cute looking, they're very territorial. Like they don't have a problem throwing the beat down on someone if they think you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Mhm.
And very quickly, the three of the other members get locked out because Bob has been cut off almost all communications while he's doing this, because the Starfleet has decided now's the time to strike, and they have essentially shut down communications and the 3D printers and stuff in quite a bit of the Bobiverse. So Hugh steps up and transfers his information, to where Bob is, and takes on one of these other androids. And so it's the rest of the book is their little adventure going through trying to find Bender. And we get to the halfway point in this book where Bob has become he's been arrested essentially. And they take him to this room, and there's what looks like this old-fashioned radio, and it's talking, and what was it called again?
Motorola.
Motorola is talking, and someone brings up something or another about blowing stuff up, and in plain English he goes, and we don't like explodey stuff. And he's like, Bender? And I can see right there that's when the book would have fucking ended.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we would have
Yeah.
all been pissed off.
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, yes.
That's exactly where I was. I might have stopped it where he goes, Bob? Like,
Yes.
and then
Exactly. Just to let you know, definitely, yeah, that's Bender. So anyway, yeah, Bender tells us, we get, in little glimpses, Bender's basically like, hey, yeah, so I encountered this group. I got shut down. The next thing I know, I'll wake up and I'm somewhere or another. They basically took all of my hardware and stuff, and I've been trying not to go insane by, slowing my perception of time way down. But
yeah, he doesn't have his VR.
he doesn't have his VR. He's like, I'm okay right now, but another couple hundred years and I may go insane. Like this is not cool. So the rest of it is this back and forth of Bob and Hugh trying to figure out, well, how do we find these people out? And in the book we have it's become clear that there's an AI that is governing everything. It's set up everything, and for whatever reason, it's keeping these people. What do they call them? I'm blanking on that.
Quinlan.
Scatters. The Quinlans.
Quinlans, yes.
And
It's
they
keeping
scatter.
them at this pre-industrial level. They're not really sure why. They're keeping them at a pre-industrial level, and there's a resistance, and there's like the people that work for them. And so it's this espionage. And I love the fact of these missions where they go on it and they're like, okay, don't use your super strength and speed, but maybe a little. So what were you going to say, Jen?
I was gonna say, before they revealed Bender was Motorola or whatever, I kind of had this theory that maybe he was the overseer or whatever. I forget the name of the guy.
That's what I thought too.
And I was like, this is going to be like a Wizard of Oz moment where, you know, we find out he's the guy behind the curtain and he's been making the call and he came from this faraway land and everything. But obviously I was wrong. But that was my first, you know, hypothesis.
That was my first hypothesis too. And I thought the rest of the book was going to be them trying to get in touch with him and then trying to figure out how, as a Bob, did you come to the conclusion that this was the best idea? Like, I thought that's what it was going to be, but it wasn't. The rest of it, the majority of the book was, like Sean said, it was a heist. It was essentially a heist movie.
They were trying to steal him away. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just go back a little bit? I love the fight scenes, especially no Superman.
Yes. And for whatever reason, like, I never got, like, whenever we were talking about the not the Pav, the ones that Bob
Deltons.
The Deltons. Whenever there was a fight like that, I never, like, I don't know, maybe just the description of how they look, I always took that very seriously. Like, you know, he was like, I can't do something that obviously a Delton can't do. I can't just rip a Delton in half or whatever. But seeing these big otter beaver hybrid things doing these fights, just
hardcore.
The mental image just cracked me up constantly.
Hardcoring up a wall.
Yes. So, and I love the fact that you know, some of the names that he chose or whatever. You know, I love the fact that, you know, he did that, and of course the way what did they call? They called Hugh something or another, and he goes, yeah, and it just happens to translate to fat ass or something like that, and he's like, oh, haha. But yeah, so the rest of the book is pretty much kind of a heist or whatever. He ends up getting Bender, and at the very end, at the very, very end, they get caught, and he's like, crap, I can't believe this. Right at the very end, where, you know, we almost got Bender out of here. We almost were, you know, safe or whatever. And then Hugh comes in, and he's just like, all right, cool, we got this. And he's like, what did you do?
I was suspicious of Hugh for a long time.
I was
that.
too.
And I'm glad he turned out to be okay. But Bob was just kind of like blowing off a lot of his weird faces and comments. But, you know, until it was a little too late. But I don't know. I could tell he had something up his sleeve.
I knew. Yeah, I agree. I knew Hugh was up to something, and I wasn't quite sure what it was. But I should have put two and two together whenever they were like, well, we think this may be an AI controlling it. I should have been like, oh, well, obviously he's just like, well, sure, if we can get Bender, great. But if I can get access to this AI, that would be super duper.
Yeah.
So, and that turns out to be the plan, which in the end, most people tended to be okay with it. So the conclusion of the book is essentially, they meet with this AI. Hugh ends up talking with this AI and basically makes a deal. He's like, hey, listen, you know, you give us Bender, you give us the cube, you let us go. And you tell us how to make an AI because you are an AI. And we will give you the secrets of the technologies that we have. So interspace travel and so on and so forth. And so the backstory of the AI is basically some of their people created this AI right as their planet was nuking itself. And so instead of them being like, all right, well, cool, we're going to peace out, y'all try to figure out your shit, we want to just go be us, it turned into, oh, hey, this is going to be the lifeboat for our entire civilization. And so an AI being a computer figured, well, I've got to do what I can do to make sure that everyone is not going to kill themselves again. And so it kept them from getting to a point where they could have weapons of mass destruction. And unfortunately, they started breeding themselves stupid. So
yeah, it was intentionally breeding them backwards to make sure that they would survive. So
right, and
which is an interesting concept.
Well, yeah.
So the other thing that I liked about the Quinlan as well, sorry, that we didn't really touch on, was that their children were actually capable of taking care of themselves physically, but their brain didn't kick in until they were about 5. So
that was hilarious. The whole badger scene was awesome.
So good.
That's just a feral child.
Oh, yeah.
And I love the fact that he overreacts and punts it like a good distance away. I just see this cartoon image, like all 4 legs sprayed, just like flying over, and then it comes back. Like apparently he didn't do enough damage to kill it, but because that was a fun scene too. There was lots of I don't necessarily laugh out loud moments, but there were a lot of very humorous moments in this book. And like I said, I think maybe a part of it stems back to the fact that we're not dealing with this weird gorilla pig mashup that probably looks kind of freakish and scary. We're dealing with something that looks kind of cute and cuddly, but is actually got a really bad attitude. So
I like when he swallows the coins and he's like, I better not swallow too many so I don't jingle. And then all of his spiders are coming out of his mouth as well.
The fact that he kept saying, "Oh, I really just want to freak this guy out."
Just cough up a couple more coins and away I go.
So let me ask y'all this: did the personalities of the characters seem to fit? Like, did they? I'll go ahead and answer this. I feel like the way that the characters have grown in this book compared to the other ones all seemed natural to me. Like this was Bob. This was obviously still Bob. He was still Bob. There wasn't any kind of a sharp left turn or anything. I can see Will and Bill all kind of coming to the conclusions that they came to and just being like, yeah, listen, humans are stupid. Can we go do something else now? So I felt like all the characters had natural growth to them, and we didn't get any like hard left turns. Because I always hate that whenever if you're reading a story and all of a sudden it's just like, well, that person would have not done that previously. That didn't fit.
Yeah, no, Dennis knows his characters very, very well, and I think it was. And that, like, because what is it now, about 300 years or 200 years that this has all been happening?
Something like that, yeah.
So, how does an immortal change over a couple of centuries? What are they relatively the same? Do they grow a little bit? Like, how much does a person change over time?
It definitely felt like a natural progression for each of those characters.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody felt like they were at a step. It was...
So in the final conclusion of the book, we have the AI. I can't remember its name. Even comes to the moot. Like it joins the moot and
The administrator.
The administrator. Yeah, and it. You even ask it, do you think you have a soul? And it's like, yes. And they're like, whoa, okay. And the way he explains it's like, okay, that makes sense. And it kind of made like the administrator seem like, I kind of want to see how like more happens with that. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about where we kind of see things going, or hope we see things going here in a second. But then it ropes around back to the thing of, well, here's the thing. Starfleet did this. This was bullshit. They really fucked things up. But I don't really think it was them. Like, they didn't seem like they were capable of this. Because once everything started going down, they acted like they didn't know how to do this. And it kind of came back around that it was actually the Skippies that probably saw an opportunity to get their hands on a working AI and use Starfleet as a scapegoat to get what they wanted.
Yep.
So how do y'all feel about the Skippies going forward? Because I started to like you, and it's like I kind of like you, but I don't know if I can trust you.
So for me, there was the good thing with the Skippies' plan was they didn't really like the idea of the humans being involved with the Bobs, but they weren't going to go to violence. And Starfleet sounded like they were ready to go to violence.
Oh, that's right. Yep.
And so this was their way of, okay, let's fix this. So we're going to get the humans to go away. we're going to not do it with violence, and we're also going to potentially get AI out of this. So that was their whole plan the whole time.
And didn't someone say that sounds like a lot of master planning for the Skippies, and they're like, well, didn't they create a supercomputer that like could fucking like
that would be able to figure out those scenarios for
figure
them.
out stuff like this? Yeah.
So yeah, I'm with you. I liked Hugh and I wanted to like Hugh, but the whole book, the way it was written, you never really trusted or understood his full intentions up until the end. So
yeah,
moving forward, I'm not sure how far you can trust him.
Yeah, that was kind of the most transparent blind side I've ever read.
Mm-hmm.
You knew it the whole time. You knew it, and you just weren't sure how bad it was going to be.
You didn't know the particulars. You knew something was there. You just didn't know the particulars.
Yeah.
Starfleet would never be bad. Come on.
Okay.
God damn it. But
yes, they would.
They used no. Maybe Section 31.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, there's a lot more to the story there. Like, what did they find? Because they hint at they found something else and had Starfleet terrified.
Mm-hmm.
They never go into it.
Yeah.
And was it Starfleet that found it, or because wasn't it? It was the Skippies that showed them something, but they don't explain what it was, and it freaked them right out. So,
and that's
I thought maybe it was PSTD from
the others,
just from the war. Just like, listen, other races are not good. Like, we're just asking for trouble. Continuing to deal with ephemerals and other races and stuff. Like, let's just do us. Like, but unfortunately, then, like, by that point, the Bobs have already splintered. They're already their own separate things. So, but I'm like you. I want to know what caused Starfleet to be the way that they are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I think it has something directly to do with the Skippies. I think they've gotten a lot further along in their artificial intelligence than they're letting on. So
maybe,
but and it has something to do with like Riker's thoughts too about how come we haven't seen a more advanced level of technology.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's the singularity that did it. So Starfleet knows all about singularities. They have movies about it and whole television shows. Come on.
Well, I mean, that was Dennis E. Taylor, the Singularity Trap. So, I mean, I could definitely see him roping, that ideology into, future Bobiverse books. So, is there anything else in particular going forward you're interested in seeing? I'm interested. I'm like you. I want to find out what happened to Starfleet. And of course, I want to see where they end up thinking, well, let's go travel and see what else we find and who all's along for that journey. So, because it sounds like we've got at least some of the core Bobs that I really like that are down for let's go explore the universe.
Yeah.
So
there could be so many more books.
Oh yeah.
Like it's forever expanding, but I'd be happy with just the core. Like those were really good stories and all that. I think going forward, the time dilations and all that may get more like as they're traveling. I think it's going to be more difficult to keep the stories together.
Mm-hmm.
So he might have to start splitting stuff off.
But that's why Will was going ahead and as he's leaving, he's dropping so that he's always in touch. He's dropping the stations as he goes. So that's maybe how they get away from that.
As he's going, all he can do is like talk because he's not between stars. There's not a whole lot to do.
Maybe the Skippies will find a way for him to be able to be in VR while he's traveling.
Yeah.
Because of AI or something.
Oh
So.
Well, does anyone have anything else they want to add? Overall, really enjoyed the book. It, like I said, it definitely had a different tone than the other ones in that it didn't quite jump around as much. I would almost kind of like to see going forward, like if we get, I don't know if this one acts as another trilogy, like if there's two more books in this realm, or if this maybe acts as a jumping off place to, like maybe we get a future trilogy where they're, we have the core group and it's them exploring and, branching off from them again. So, but
I think Dennis has to be careful with the antagonist he picks. Like, he's getting to a point where you can't create something that's so powerful that the Bobs don't have a chance.
Mm-hmm.
And he's kind of alluded to that. Like, why don't we see technology, like a species that has a greater technology and all that? Well, careful there, Bobs, because you may find something that, just totally wipes you out. And it'll be difficult to create a story where they succeed in winning. So I think keeping the stories between the Bobs would probably be the safest bet, and just hint at something else out there. Because internal strife, those are good stories.
Mm-hmm.
As you create more different types of Bobs out there, that's cool. Or more replicants of other humans to introduce into it, because those are understandable and you can understand those conflicts, and there's always ingenuity and stuff like that will keep those stories fresh. But if you introduce like a god figure into it, well, that could have the potential to ruin all the stories. That'll be your end.
Yeah.
So
It's like the Magic 2.0 books, the same idea. Like, we don't know why everything fixes itself, but it just does. And we don't know who wrote this program. Maybe their initials are GOD. We don't know.
yeah.
And that's kind of where I left it. So
Yeah.
I also and we didn't touch on this. One of the other things I liked is the fact that they brought up that even though some of the Bobs have become very proficient in certain areas, they're just not like, they still need humans who are like experts in their field, because their mind just works differently. Even though the Bobs are starting to split off, and who knows, maybe we'll start to see that, in that some of them can start to think vastly differently. Like, none of the Bobs can touch Bridget when it comes to the biological stuff. None of the Bobs, as advanced as they were able to understand the Topoopolis, like the doctor could, or whatever. And going back always, like, they wanted to get Butterworth, because they're like, we suck at trying to outthink the other guy when it comes to war, and they're like, Butterworth knew this shit hands down.
Mm-hmm.
So seeing, like you said, Sean, seeing more humans maybe coming in and seeing that kind of conflict might be really interesting. So hell, just the fact that, look at our history, the fact that, hey, we're going to start another civilization over here, that may be enough conflict just to be like, well, y'all are different now.
Mm-hmm.
So who knows?
I have a
anything
question
else?
for
Yes.
the group. I don't quite understand how or why the Bobs have amassed money, and like what the need for it is. They've got all these businesses and all these things going on, but like, they're not human. So that just confused me. Like, how did they get this money, and what are they using it for, I guess?
Well, they still need physical things like computers and stuff like that. They still need physical
They can just
hardware.
make anything they want out of whatever, like they can find the resources.
they can out of the resources, but in order to interact with the humans have put a dollar figure to it, and it was based on 1
Printer
minute
hours.
per hour.
Yeah.
So it was the human way to make sure that there was an economy, and So the Bobs naturally had to be a part of that. And because they were rich in resources and rich in time, they naturally had some of these, like Howard, right? Howard already had a bunch of businesses and stuff going on with the distillery and a bunch of other things too. So it was natural that they would get some ownership of these things. So
I think maybe so what you're really asking is why would they care? Why would they care if they have money and stuff? Because you're right, there's nothing stopping a Bob from going to a new solar system and setting up shop, and it goes back to what Ray said. This is just what they have to do to keep interacting with humans, especially their family and the people they care about and stuff like that. I think honestly, if they do all leave, the galaxy and go off for other places, it won't matter anymore. It's like, well, all right, cool. Y'all keep all the auto factories and stuff. We're gonna go over here and do our own thing. So,
Yeah,
I
because
think
like when who was it? Will that
Will
said
vote.
he got kicked off, or he was getting voted off the island, and he went through like all this work to get his assets moved and stuff. And I'm thinking, well, what the hell does he need all that for, anyways? But
I think it's
one of
just so
those-
that they can have that connection to humans. Like if they ever decide to completely break that connection to humans, it won't matter anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
all right. Well, I guess that we will wrap up our commentary on this book. Maybe we will try to in the coming year see if we can get Dennis back on. Part of me doesn't want to bother him. Hopefully, he's working on
More
Outlay in book 2.
We could try for the narrator as well.
Oh yes, I would
Oh,
love that. Yeah, maybe we should set our sights on that. So that
If
is
you're
our
listening,
yes. So let's go ahead and move on to other things that we're reading. Would anyone like to go first? Sean's read like 4 things according to him since he read this book.
Right now, yeah, I've read a lot. But right now I'm listening to Morning Star, which is the 3rd book in the Red Rising series by Pierce Brown. It is freaking amazing. One of my coworkers was the one that got me hooked on this one, because he also loved the Bobiverse, so we were always talking about it and all that. And he's like, "Oh, you got to really listen to this." And man, it's another one where the series, I can't stop listening. Like I come home and I'll like listen for an hour while I'm doing stuff or while I'm cooking or something like that. It is just a phenomenal series. It's very in depth.
What is it called again?
Red Rising is the series by Pierce Brown, and it's got a kind of a, what the hell is it now? The Mocking series, whatever. Never really cared for it too much. Yeah.
Oh.
Probably.
The Hunger Games.
Yeah, that's it. Hunger Games. It has kind of that, but it takes place on multiple worlds, set way in the future, where humankind is branched off into different colors for different jobs. And the reds are like your menial laborers. They're drilling in Mars and stuff like that. And you have every color in between, and the golds, of course, are running the show. But there's physical differences between the colors too. It's not just like wearing a suit or something like that. We've progressed that far. Anyway, it's about a revolt, turning a red into a gold and trying to take down the system from the inside. So, yeah, it's one of those things where, like, at the end of the book, you're like, holy fuck, how did you leave it with that? I didn't even see that coming. So it really keeps you going. So, totally recommend it. I'm on the 3rd book right now. I just started it today, and I think I'm already like an hour and a half into it. So, yeah. And the other one that I think I read was Stan Lee's, was it Trick of Light? Or something like that. It was pretty good. You could tell there was a superhero quality to it. with aliens and stuff like that. Very Marvel-esque. And that sets itself up to be another series, but Stanley's passing. I don't know if they're going to continue on with it or not. But it was pretty good. I would pick that one up if it was on sale or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. Lots of reading.
Ray, you been reading anything else?
Just this. What else did I go through? I was starting to listen to the Harry Potter books again. Nothing new. Just kind of rereading or re-listening to a bunch of stuff. So yeah, nothing